want to talk about the Skype issue?
Your Honor, the prosecution has graciously agreed to allow me to bring in Officer Toya via Skype, and I think my office has been working with the court thus far to figure out the technical necessities of that.
Okay.
And that is correct, Judge. As much as I'd like to be a jerk in this matter, and especially since Ms. DesRosiers had to come all the way from Canada, I will not. And I want to stay on the record. I believe in due process for his client, and if that's the only way he can get his witness here, that's the way we'll allow him to get his witness here. I do want to raise something else, Judge, and if we can approach the bench before the next witness testifies.
Who's the next witness?
Dom Perez.
change it over to prosecution too. Thank you.
Please stand. Thank you, you may be seated. Mr. Robles, you may call your next witness.
Dominique Perez.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth and nothing but the truth under penalty of law?
I do.
Thank you, you may be seated. Please state your name for the record.
Dominique Perez.
You may be seated.
Is it correct to say that you're a defendant in this case?
Yes, sir.
Now, before we reach the incident, which which brought us here, all of us here, I'd like to talk a little bit about your background. Where were you born?
I was born here in Albuquerque,
And which high school did you attend?
Del Norte High School.
And what year did you graduate?
That was in 1999.
And I understand that that's where you met your future wife.
That's correct.
Now, after graduating from Del Norte High School, you attended the University of New Mexico, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And how long did you attend the University of New Mexico?
That was only for about a year.
And why did you decide to leave the University of New Mexico?
I decided I wanted to enlist in the Marine Corps.
Why did you choose to enlist in the Marine Corps?
Well, I was always wanting to, I had things that are challenging, or having a challenge is a big thing for me. And so I knew that serving my country being one thing, and then also being able to attain and going through that challenge, becoming a United States Marine was a big deal. So that's why I wanted to do it.
What year did you enlist in the United States Marine Corps?
That was in 2000.
You successfully completed Marine recruit training, correct?
Yes, sir.
You successfully completed Marine combat training, correct?
Yes.
And then ultimately, your military occupational specialty was what?
My MOS was 0313, or Light Armored Vehicle Crewman.
And what does a light armored vehicle crewman do?
Well, you have many tasks as an LAV crewman. The main thing when you graduate the school is that you are the driver and the maintainer of the vehicle. For lack of a better term, a LAV is like a tank, if you will, but with tires as opposed to tracks. And so you maintain the vehicle, you learn how to drive it, operate it, maintain the equipment in it, and then wear the crew and how to deal with the crew in the vehicle.
Now, once you completed your training, to which company were you assigned?
I was with the Delta Company, 1st Light Armored Reconnaissance Battalion, 1st Marine Division.
Now, I understand that you were deployed twice during Operation Iraqi Freedom, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, how did your deployments in Iraq prepare you for your work in law enforcement?
Well, I think a big thing with being in combat is obviously there's high stress environment. There's constant things going on there where you're having to pay attention to your surroundings, and you also have to work in team environments. So I thought that having that type of background, being cool, calm under pressure, and having to make those decisions in those high stress situations is a viable skill and would prepare me for being a police officer.
Briefly, please tell us about your first deployment in Iraq.
So my first deployment was about 2003 in March, March 19th to be exact. I was sitting on the Kuwait and Iraq border there with the 1st Marine Division. We got the go-ahead to move into Iraq, so I was with the 1st Marine Division on the push through for our entire offensive phase for the Marines, fighting our way up through Iraq, so going through Baghdad and onto Saddam's hometown of Tikrit.
Now, please tell us about your second deployment in Iraq.
Well, after coming back and having a short break from my first deployment, on my second deployment, I was tasked with other group members from my unit to provide security for Major General Mattis, who is the 1st Marine Division General for all the Marines in Iraq. And I was assigned to his security detail to provide security for him as one of the, how would you say, veteran gunners for the vehicles, because my billet was being a gunner on one of the vehicles to provide security for him.
You use two terms, billet and gunner. What is a billet and what is a gunner?
So gunner, the term gunner would be the billet, and the billet is your assigned job on the vehicle. So driver being that billet, gunner, and then vehicle commander. So there's those three terms for the vehicle itself, and then you have scouts, which are the Marines that ride in the back.
So what is it that a gunner does, to be clear?
Well, for a gunner, your jobs pretty much are the same as a vehicle commander, only your main tasks are dealing with the guns, the weapon systems of the vehicle. So you are the main gunner, dealing with the main weapon system in the turret, moving the turret and negotiating that, along with maintaining the other weapon systems that are on the vehicle. The crew-served weapons, which are machine guns and other type of weaponry like that. You also handle the communications and the radio of the vehicle, and then being that go-between for the vehicle commander and for your company leaders who are communicating with your vehicle.
Now, what happened on May 23rd, 2004, as you were providing security for a convoy for General Mattis?
Well, that day we had just taken the general to Fallujah, and he had made a liaison with one of the local sheikhs of the town, basically a mayor at that time. He had just finished a meeting with them, and we were now gathering up the group and moving back on a route back to Al Ramadi. Coming back from the general's meeting, we were ambushed by a vehicle improvised explosive device, or a VBID. That vehicle basically blew up, taking out my lead vehicle, which was me, and completely disabling our vehicle.
What happened to you as a result of the IED explosion?
Well, I was lucky to be alive. My driver got hit from the shrapnel going through the vehicle. My vehicle commander, who was on my right side, he died instantly. I received shrapnel peppering on my face, arm, and head.
And for your injuries suffered at the hands of enemy forces, is it correct to say you were awarded the Purple Heart?
Yes, sir.
Now, what happened to you after you were injured?
Well, I was medically evacuated from there to Germany and then back to the States.
Now, what were the terms of separation from the United States? What were your terms of separation for your service in the United States Marines?
I was honorably discharged.
Now, is it correct to say you have 3 children?
Yes, sir.
2 boys and a girl?
2 girls and a boy.
I'm sorry, got that mixed up. Now, after serving in the United States Marine Corps, I believe that's when you began working as a security police officer. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What is that job, a security police officer? What is that?
Well, the place I was working for was the Department of Energy, and the security police officer is basically a federal law enforcement officer providing security for our nation's nuclear secrets and assets.
Okay. Now, after being horribly injured by an IED ambush in Iraq, why did you choose to become a police officer instead of finding, well, a job that doesn't have these dangers?
Well, it was closer to home, for one. My wife appreciated that much more. But also, I wasn't done serving for my country. So I felt if I could do something along the same lines, I still had the skill set and the mindset to do that job. I figured I should still contribute being back here in the States.
Who trained you to become a security police officer?
That was the personnel with the Department of Energy and the National Training Center.
Now, what is the National Training Center and where is it located?
The NTC, or National Training Center, is out here at Kirtland Air Force Base.
And what type of training were you given to become a security police officer?
Well, they go through, you have a basic academy, just like you would in the police department, where you get taught the procedures and everything that you need to know on how to interact with the public, dealing with the federal installations, and on also what your main jobs are in providing security for particular sites. The level of clearances and what you need to look for, just, it's a wide range of things that you have to be schooled in from them. But then also you have to pass qualifications dealing with firearms. Like I said, a lot of it's the same as what you have to go through to be a police officer, only you're handling it on the federal installation.
After you became a security police officer, where did you go to work?
I worked up in Los Alamos at their labs.
And what type of work did you do as a security police officer at the Los Alamos National Labs?
Well, after I'd made it through the academy, I put in for their special response team, which is basically their SWAT team. That's the Security Police Officer 3. I went to the SWAT schools that they, and the training that they require so that you can attain that certification. And then from there, once I get certified down here, I go back up to Los Alamos and guard some of the more secure and volatile areas around the sites up there, being in that position.
Why would the Los Alamos National Labs need a SWAT team?
Well, we have some very important things that we need to keep secure, nuclear secrets and special nuclear material and other things along those lines. So they need to be able to deter and also recover, if needed, anyone who is trying to attack or sabotage or try and get those secrets.
Why did you leave your job as a security police officer?
I wanted to become a police officer with the Albuquerque Police Department.
Why the Albuquerque Police Department?
Well, like you heard earlier, Dan Cafferkey, after training with him when I was going through the SWAT school for the Department of Energy, I had some interactions with him there, and like he said, he pretty much recruited me after hearing the camaraderie and the ability to get out there and actually work in the community as opposed to what I was currently doing. I thought that was a better skill set for me.
Now, we've heard before that you attended the Albuquerque Police Department Academy and you were a member of the 94th Cadet class. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
You had an opportunity to listen to the testimony that was given by the edge weapons instructor, whose name has just now escaped me.
Yes,
Dave?
Hubbard. Dave Hubbard.
Dave Hubbard. I apologize. Now, you heard Dave Hubbard testify, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Is your recollection of the training you received from Dave Hubbard back in the 94th Cadet class, was it consistent with the testimony he gave on Friday?
Yes, sir.
Now, you also had the opportunity to listen to Dan Cafferkey testify, is that right?
That's correct.
And he was the lieutenant, then commander of the Albuquerque Police Department Academy, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
How consistent was his explanation of the training you received with the training you remember receiving?
It was spot on. I mean, everything that he said we went through, that's what we completed.
You also heard Sergeant Bob Johnston testify, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, you heard Sergeant Bob Johnston testify about the use of force training that he gave, is that right?
Yes, sir.
How consistent was the testimony that Officer Johnston gave about the use of force training with what you remember being given by Sergeant Bob Johnston?
It was very consistent and very thorough, because I remember his class being as thorough as he was on the stand.
Now, in order to successfully complete the Albuquerque Police Department Academy, you took a number of tests, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And it's correct to say that your overall average score before you graduated was 90.52%?
That sounds about right. Yes, sir.
When did you graduate from the Albuquerque Police Department Academy?
That was December of 2006.
Now, after graduating the Albuquerque Police Department Academy, you still weren't certified to be a law enforcement officer in the state, is that correct?
Correct.
What did you have to do, even after successfully graduating from the Albuquerque Police Department Academy, to become a state-certified law enforcement officer?
Well, you had to complete the academy, but then you also have to pass the state certification final examination.
And it's fair to say you passed that test.
Yes, sir.
When did you obtain your state certification?
The same day, December 22nd.
Now, there was also testimony in this case by Commander Dan Cafferkey about the advanced training that was given to Albuquerque Police Department officers. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, is your recollection of the advanced training you received through the Albuquerque Police Department Academy consistent with what Commander Cafferkey testified to?
Yes, it's consistent.
Now, there was also Sergeant Jim Fox. He is the SWAT team sergeant. Is that right?
Yes.
And you heard him testify about the training that he had his SWAT team members undergo.
Yes.
And how consistent it was the testimony that Sergeant Fox gave about the training that was given with your recollection about the training you actually received as a SWAT team member?
It was consistent, sir.
And again, I should have prefaced this. There came a point in time in which you became a member of the Albuquerque Police Department SWAT team.
Yes, sir.
Now, how many years did you work as an officer before you joined the Albuquerque Police Department SWAT team?
That was roughly 2.5 to 3 years.
Now, Sergeant James Fox also testified as to a selection process that all tactical or SWAT team officers go through. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, how consistent was Sergeant Fox's testimony about the selection process with your memory about the selection process that you actually went through?
It was consistent. I mean, it's a very thorough process and a very rigorous process.
Now, in addition to the training you received, I understand that you've also been awarded a number of advanced training certificates. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
Now, the first one I'd like to talk to you about will be marked as Officer Perez's Exhibit I-6. May I approach him? Do you recognize what has been marked as Exhibit I-6?
Yes, sir.
What is it?
It's my less lethal impact munitions certification.
Now, is this a fair and accurate copy of your actual New Mexico Law Enforcement Academy less lethal instructor certificate?
Yes, sir.
At this time, Your Honor, I would like to move Officer Perez's Exhibit I-6 into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor. I take the meeting.
You know, we've had a certain amount of testimony about less lethal impact munitions, so it's not that I want you to talk about those now. But what I do want you to explain is what coursework did you have to complete in order to become certified by the state to teach less lethal impact munitions?
Well, you're initially, because of the academy and other MOE classes, what the, Dan Cafferkey talked about, you get certified and you stay current on your less lethal impact munitions for taser shotgun and for beanbag shotgun. These ones, I went to a separate course, which is the Defense Technologies course, where they are a manufacturer of less lethal impact munitions and other less lethal munitions, and they bring out an instructor. You attend the course and do practical application by deploying these certain less lethal impact munitions and basically taking a test and other written exams dealing with those less lethal impact munitions. That's what allows you, after you've performed all that and taken the test, you get your instructor certification. Throughout that process, you have to basically teach the instructor what you just learned about those impact munitions.
And it's fair to say that before you ever received your specialty certifications, you were also certified as a general instructor, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And you heard some testimony given by Dan Cafferkey about, you know, sort of how you teach, how the New Mexico Department of Public Safety teaches an officer to become an instructor.
Yes, sir.
And is that consistent with what the process that you went through to become a general instructor?
Yes, sir, that's consistent.
And then this certificate is a specialty certificate, is that right?
That's correct.
Because this is a high-risk area of police work.
That's correct. The other one is a general instructor where you just instruct, or you're showing that you can instruct other students, and then this one is a specialty for that.
What was the focus of that's a poor question. In becoming a less lethal impacts munitions instructor, what did you learn about the use of noise flash diversionary devices?
Well, with noise flash diversionary devices, you learn everything from the nomenclature of what parts are what on the device, proper deployment, what are the hazards, and what the effects are from those devices.
In practice, how many times have you used noise flash diversionary device or been present when one was used?
As far as practice goes, hundreds and hundreds of times. For actual real-world operations, even more, numerous times.
Going to hand you another exhibit, an exhibit that's Officer Perez's I-7. I'd like to have you take a look at it, and once you have, I'd like to ask you about it. What is Exhibit I-7?
It's another one of my certifications. It's for precision rifle and SWAT tactics.
Is Exhibit I-7 a fair and accurate depiction of your New Mexico Law Enforcement Academy Sniper Precision Rifle Certificate?
Yes, sir.
At this time, Your Honor, Officer Perez moves Exhibit I-7 into evidence.
Any objection? No objection. I-7 is admitted.
Now, what is a sniper precision rifle?
Well, for this certification, you have to attend a basic sniper school, and with that class, you're learning everything from the proper maintenance of the weapon system itself, how to deploy it, proper target engagements with it, and basically just learning and knowing how to deal with and operate with the sniper weapon system. And then including that, how you deploy as far as a SWAT officer or a specialized unit as a sniper.
Now, why did you choose to learn about, I think the term is called sniper craft? That is what a sniper does.
Well, on the APD SWAT team, there's multiple jobs, sniper being one of them. And the thing is that they're, for whatever reason, officers either leave the team or promote out, or for whatever reason. And we have to have officers that are able to fill those jobs and take up that task. So I was approached by my supervisors on learning about this task so that I would be able to fill that should the need arise for that job to be filled.
So what is the role of a sniper on the Albuquerque Police Department SWAT team?
The biggest role is observation, relaying information and intelligence. You deploy in a position where you can see certain locations of wherever the incident is occurring and relay that information to the team leader, arrest team, and then also to relay the information to the command post and give them the information they need to make the decisions on what they need to do. You're also able to, if need be, depending on if a deadly threat presents itself, to deliver rifle fire.
Prior to becoming a sniper precision rifle instructor, what schools or classes did you successfully complete on that topic?
Prior to this certification, I had attended 2, maybe 3. I have to look at the year on this. I know at least 2 different sniper schools.
I'd like to turn your attention to Exhibit I-9. I'm going to approach you and show you what's been marked Exhibit I-9. And once you've had a chance to look at it, I'd like to ask you about it. Do you recognize Exhibit I-9?
Yes, sir.
What is it?
My firearms instructor certification and general police certification through the state.
Is Exhibit I-9 a fair and accurate depiction of the New Mexico Law Enforcement Academy Firearms Instructor Certificate?
Yes, sir.
At this time, Your Honor, Officer Perez would like to move Exhibit I-9 into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
I-9 is amended.
Now, prior to becoming a firearms instructor, what courses and classes do you successfully complete in order to become an instructor in this topic?
Well, for this one, you have to go and attend the APD FIC, Firearms Instructor Course, which is a 40-hour block, or excuse me, even longer actually. But the block is instruction on each one of these weapon systems, the handgun, shotgun, and rifle. And you do everything from maintenance to weapons manipulation to setting up courses of fire, and then instructing the instructor basically on those different weapon systems and all those different topics. So you do that, you do the written examination as well, and then do a course of fire that certifies you with these weapon systems.
Having been certified by the state as an instructor in the area of firearms, what specifically are you allowed to now teach?
You can teach maintenance, manipulation, and firearms exercises, basically firearms in general with every one of these platforms.
So who can you teach with this certificate?
I can teach any of the officers on the department. I can also assist with teaching out of the Department of Energy.
Now I'd like to turn your attention to Exhibit I-11. Going to hand you what's been marked Exhibit I-11. And once you've had a chance to look at it, I'd like to ask you some questions about it. What is Exhibit I-11?
This is a certification from a rifle school that I went to with the FBI.
Is Exhibit I-10 a fair and accurate depiction of your FBI SWAT M4 carbine school certificate?
Yes, sir.
At this time, Your Honor, Officer Perez moves Exhibit I-11 into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
I-11 is amended.
To begin, what is an M4 carbine?
That's a very long explanation. So
Okay, what type of weapon is an M4 carbine?
No, it's fine. An M4 is basically a variant of the M16 rifle, one of the variants. And anyway, the designation of SWAT M4 would just be assigning the word SWAT to the M4 rifle and the course itself. SWAT meaning assigning some method of tactic or firearms manipulation that goes with this school.
Now-
Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. How similar is the weapon that you used during the James Boyd incident to an M4 carbine?
It is an M4.
Why did you obtain firearms training from the United States Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation?
Another a training opportunity that presented itself, my supervisors let me know that there was a course available. I stated that I'd take the course. It's always good to see what other agencies have to offer. We're always trying to improve our tactics, our techniques, and our procedures, and seeing if someone else has developed something better or has a new way of doing something. That way we can learn from that and progress.
Now, we spoke an awful lot, just not trying to spend too much time on things that we've covered. But one thing that I want to make sure that everyone understands and knows is that the training you have received regarding layered, less lethal munitions, or the application or the layered approach of using less lethal munitions. Would you please describe the training you received as a SWAT member regarding the use of a layered approach for the use of less lethal means?
Well, layered less lethal response, in one way or another, pretty much is a part of every SWAT activation or SWAT call-out. We also implement it a lot with our training. You always want to have a less lethal layered response plan available no matter which location you are in a certain situation, in the SWAT activation or even in just an everyday call. You have some type of layered response. So with the SWAT team, we always want to have as many layers of less lethal available. So that way we have, if one doesn't work, then there's another one to fall back on, and so on and so forth, as it moves all the way down for the layered less lethal response.
In real-world situations, how many times have you been involved in a response in which a layered less lethal approach was used?
Numerous times. I mean, I can't even think of a number. It's very common for us to use them on the SWAT activations that I've been on.
Now, with regards to your experience on the SWAT team, when did you first join?
That was in 2009.
In that time, from 2009 to 2014, how many activations had you been on, SWAT team activations had you been on?
That's somewhere upwards of 350 to about 400.
And in the month of March, or I should say, and in March of 2014, how many activations were you on?
One definitely, or maybe two. I'm not really sure.
Now, there's also the training you received regarding the use of deadly force by cover officers. You've heard a lot of testimony about that from different officers. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And how consistent was the testimony given by Sergeant Fox, Sergeant Johnston, and others about the use of the role of a cover officer in situations in which involve the use of the role of a cover officer?
It is very accurate. I mean, the role of the cover officer is to provide security and to be aware of what's going on for the other officers. If you are assigned that job, that's your one job, and you take it seriously.
Now, what training did you receive regarding the proper response when you are serving as a cover officer and you see an immediate deadly threat posed to another officer?
If you're the cover officer and you see an immediate deadly threat,
Yes.
you deliver deadly force.
What if another officer places him or herself in a position that allows an armed subject to become an immediate threat to that officer?
If he puts himself in an immediate deadly threat
Yes.
position, you deliver deadly force.
So is it fair to say that even if an officer creates a dangerous situation for him or herself, your training is that if that officer faces an immediate threat of serious bodily harm, you use deadly force?
Yes, sir. Your job does not change.
Now, I'd like to turn your attention to the SWAT team activation to 812 Piedra Vista Road Northeast on March the 14th of 2014. Now, where were you when you received a phone call from Sergeant James Fox?
On March 16th, I was at home with my family.
Now, once you received the phone call, I should say, were you working on March the 14th, 2014?
No, I was off that day.
Why did you decide to leave your family on the day you were off to go to a SWAT call?
Well, that's my job. We are on call 24/7.
So how did you find out that there was an incident that was occurring in the city's open space?
Well, like you just said, Sergeant Fox had called me on my department-issued cell phone and let me know what the situation was that was happening in the foothills.
Now, what time did you receive that call?
That was roughly 18:45 or 6:45 p.m.
Now, what did Sergeant Fox tell you about the incident that was happening out in the city's open space?
Well, he had limited information. The information he did give me was that there was a subject up in the foothills. He had threatened officers with knives, and it was being treated basically like a barricaded situation. Said he wanted to start a couple of officers, a couple of SWAT guys to the area and help them out in the event that it did go to a SWAT activation.
Based on your training and experience, what types of crimes had this person, this suspect, committed?
Well, initially, he had been contacted for the camping offense, and then when he pulled his knives on the officers, that was aggravated assault on a peace officer.
At this point, had the incident become a SWAT call-out?
No, sir.
Why is that?
It hadn't been officially made a SWAT activation yet.
Now, prior to leaving your house, what did you do to prepare for this SWAT team call, or for this call?
Well, when I was at home, I had to dress out in my uniform, my SWAT uniform, and then as soon as I did that, made sure I had everything from the house that I would need, went out to my vehicle, turned on my vehicle, turned on my computer, and it takes a minute for my KDT to start booting up, and then started reading the remarks on the call and turning on the radio so that way the information could start flowing in.
Now, what is your routine in terms of using well, let me ask, what is a KDT, just to be clear?
The KDT is my computer that's assigned to my vehicle and assigned to me. I use it to log on to let the dispatch know that I am logging on and that I'm available. And then I use it to assist me in whatever call or activation that I'm going to. I will immediately log on whatever the call is, if I'm being dispatched, or the radio dispatch can actually dispatch me herself. But because Sergeant Fox had gotten a hold of me, I went and found the call and brought it up. And as soon as I log on to the call, it starts giving me all the information from the very beginning on everything that has transpired before I got logged on.
What is your routine once you receive a dispatch or a call in terms of how you use the KDT to prepare you for responding to the call?
Oh, well, like it's been said before, it's a running history. So you start reading from the very beginning and try and gather all the information you can from that KDT. So I'm reading through all that, seeing or taking in everything that's been either used or said, or who's involved, what officers are there, what resources are there, trying to start and get a game plan, because things may have changed and it will be notated on the information there that maybe the location has changed, or maybe the subject has changed something in his demeanor that is making the situation either become more imminent, or maybe it's diffusing a little bit, so you don't have to respond so heavily.
So when you received the call, went to your vehicle, how thoroughly did you review the history from the CAD as you drove to Piedra Vista?
Well, it was a combination. I was reading through, I read through the whole CAD because I was able to scroll through as I was waiting for my vehicle to warm up. And I was able to read most of that, and then also listen to the radio as it's happening on the Foothills channel.
Now, there's been a certain amount of testimony that's been given about the nature of the call, who responded, what time, and certain things that happened. I certainly don't want to go through all of that, but there are certain things that I think that are very important that we understand what you thought. So there came a point in time in which there was a dispatch at 501 where Officer McDaniel asked to 10-3 the air. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
When you hear that that someone has requested to 10-3 the air, what does that tell you about the nature of the call?
Well, anytime you hear 10-3 over the air, it makes you stop and focus on what's going on the radio. 10-3 is not used lightly. It is a common thing to happen shortly after someone says 10-3 over the air that you may hear within the next 5-10 minutes subjects being taken into custody or something along those lines. But when you hear 10-3 and then nothing follows, something is transpiring at that time and you don't know what it is yet, so you're waiting for the information.
Now at about 5:13, the operator requested 5355. Now, when you found out that the operator had requested 4355, how did you interpret that, and what did it mean to you?
Well, that tells me that the situation is at a point where there's the potential for some type of force to be used, whether it be from the police officer's side or from the subject that they're contacting. Also, it's common that because of the situation maybe moving in a certain direction, supervisors or even an officer could request that, hey, we want some rescue on standby just in case something happens. It's better to have them there and not need them.
Now, I
than not
understand.
have them. I'm sorry.
I apologize. I understand that you're certified through the Albuquerque Police Department Academy to provide first aid, is that correct?
That's correct.
Well, why would you have an ambulance and rescue standby if you, for instance, are certified in first aid?
Well, if you have the opportunity to have rescue on standby, that's much better. I mean, they are the specialists and they are the experts at this. So better to have them get up there and make sure you can secure what you have, the situation you have, and get them up there to start administering aid as soon as you can, rather than I mean, it's only a quick life-saving certification. So you're only trying to slow things down to get the rescue there.
Now, at 5:15, the operator noted that and again, the operator noted that CIT is on scene, contacting male subject, is not listening to commands, still talking to male. When you read that particular history, what did that tell you about the nature of the call that you were responding to?
Well, with this comment, I mean, it just tells me that they do have a CIT on scene, trying to talk with the subject, but then also that they're obviously trying to get the command or give the subject commands to do something, and he's not following along. The subject's not following along.
What does it say to you that a CIT officer is making those attempts and the CIT officer isn't making progress?
Well, it concerns me a little more. If it was an officer that didn't have CIT training and wasn't making, then I would be even more concerned, or excuse me, less concerned. But this CIT officer has training in this and knows the verbal things to use and how to talk to subjects in distress. And if they're not even making headway, then that's already concerning to me.
Now, at 5:59, you read a statement on the CAD that states state police on scene, 56, and then 25 contacting with subject but no progress being made. When you read that particular history, what did that tell you about the efforts that were being made to try and negotiate a resolution with the person in the open space?
Well, in the earlier comments, I had also read that the subject had requested the state police, and the fact that APD went out of their way to try and get a state police officer to come out and talk to him, which was excellent. That he got there and is trying to make contact with the subject, and it's not panning out still. I mean, they're trying every avenue, trying to resolve this peacefully, but it's not happening.
What does it tell you that if the subject had asked for the state police and the state police responded but weren't able to make progress, what does that tell you about the type of person that you're dealing with?
Well, it tells me that the subject is non-compliant. I mean, he's not wanting to resolve the situation. We are giving the tools and the things that he's requesting and trying to please him and help him to end the situation peacefully, and he's refusing to do so.
Now, at 6:23, you learn about Mr. Boyd's background. Now, you learned that, what did you learn specifically, and why was it important for you to know this information?
So with this information, which we've already gone over several times, this is telling me, obviously, he has an extensive criminal history, aggravated battery on peace officers in various jurisdictions, including Albuquerque. So just in that situation alone, or that information alone, it tells me he's willing to attack officers, and he's done it here already in Albuquerque, so that already lets me know if he's making these threats or he's wanting to go forward with these threats, he's done it before. And it has been reported that he's a paranoid schizophrenic, so he has mental health issues. And then to use extreme caution when contacting him. I mean, that's just a general, or not general, excuse me, that's a key thing that's being relayed, because any officer is just letting you know that any officer who contacts Mr. Boyd should use extreme caution, obviously.
Now, you were focused on the fact that Mr. Boyd had committed aggravated battery against law enforcement officers. Is that right, in your testimony just now?
Yes, sir.
So what difference does it make that a suspect has committed aggravated battery against just the typical citizen versus a law enforcement officer? Why does that matter to you?
Well, for me, when I was raised as a kid, I mean, you're always taught, hey, respect the police. That's what I was taught and how I was brought up. So for the fact of the matter of someone, if it's a citizen that has committed aggravated battery on another citizen, there could be some other type of underlying circumstance, emotional issue, some type of disagreement. I mean, you don't know what that could potentially be. If you have an officer who is in an official capacity and is in a position of authority, and that person is willing to ignore that authority and ignore the fact that that officer could reprimand them for their actions, and they're willing to go over that to still perform the aggravated battery, that's pretty intense on my perception.
Now, at 6:33, you learned some information from the responding officers. And what was that information, and what did it mean to you?
Okay, so, excuse me, 756, one of the K-9 officers is relaying this information. He's saying that officers contacted the subject, and that he's basically giving a rundown on what had happened for the initial call, that officers had contacted him and he pulled out a knife and threatened them, and then said he was going to kill him, the 27-1 comment. Also that he's left the weapon systems, the knives, opened in his front pockets, which makes them easily retrievable and ready to be used.
Based on the information you learned from the call history, what did that tell you about the crime that this person, James Boyd, had committed?
That it was aggravated assault on a peace officer, with the comment on the knives and then threatening to kill the officers.
And what did you learn about how Mr. Boyd was armed?
Oh, I learned that he was armed with two pocket knives that were ready in his front pockets.
Now, turning your attention to an entry that occurred at 6:59. What does this entry say, and how did you use this to help you understand the nature of the threat which Mr. Boyd posed?
So this is coming in from Officer Wymaskirch, the K-9 officer. I'm sorry, do you want me to wait more?
I think that, oh, there you go, sorry. It's blinking on and off.
Okay. This is coming in from Officer Wymaskirch, and he's now relaying the information. That subject is still highly irate, so obviously he's agitated about something, still giving the comments of wanting to kill officers and making other 1040 or mental unorthodox comments.
Now, talks about 27-1 being 34s. What does that mean precisely?
Killing officers.
Upon reading this statement, what did that tell you about the nature of the threat which Mr. Boyd posed?
A deadly threat. I mean, he's making these comments to kill officers. I mean, that's it's clear.
Now, there came a point in time when you arrived at 812 Piedra Vista.
Yes, sir.
Approximately what time did you arrive at 812 Piedra Vista?
That was roughly around 7:10, 7:11 time frame.
Now, please describe what happened upon your arrival at 812 Piedra Vista.
When I first arrived there, I saw a bunch of marked units, police vehicles. I initially pulled up, got out of my vehicle, grabbed my handheld radio, and then after reading the remarks on where this was taking in the open space, I walked in between two houses and looked through their side yards, if you will, towards the back, towards the east, where this was transpiring, and then started orienting myself on where everyone was at, because when I pulled up, there was a bunch of police vehicles, but no police around. So I'm looking for anyone to make contact with, and as I look through those 2 yards, I'm able to see the officers in contact with who I later identified as Mr. Boyd.
When you first identified Mr. Boyd, again, you later learned him to be Mr. Boyd.
Yes, sir.
When you first identified him, what was Mr. Boyd doing?
He was, when I first looked up there, he was standing on the mass of rocks that we've seen. And he's standing and he's facing towards the south, and there's a group of officers standing over there. And after orienting myself on where he was at, I noticed that he was screaming and yelling at those officers at that current time. I couldn't make out what he was saying because I was over 100 yards away, but I could see that he was yelling, or this subject was yelling towards the officers that were on to the south.
What was your initial assessment of the terrain and the officer's position upon your arrival?
Well, from the angle I was at, I could see that the outcropping of rocks that he was standing on was clearly higher than where the officers were at. To me, that seemed to be a position of advantage for him, mainly because he's higher up than them. And, officers, we're constantly trying to be vigilant and be aware of our surroundings and what can benefit us as far as cover or concealment. Along those lines, we also have to worry about what the subject or person we are dealing with, what they have to benefit them. So the fact that he's higher up, has that rock outcropping, and is able to either duck behind there and has other things behind there, that concerns me.
Now, after making your initial assessment, which SWAT supervisor did you see?
Sergeant James Fox, my SWAT supervisor.
You walked up to him, is that correct to say?
Yes, sir.
After you walked up to Sergeant Fox's position, what did you and Sergeant Fox discuss?
Well, after I oriented myself, I walked over to Sergeant Fox's vehicle, and it's every time I go to a call, especially when he's notified me to go there, I go and I check in with him to find out where he needs me and what he needs me to do. So I walk up to him, ask him, because I know where the terrain is, or the terrain that we are going to be dealing with. Since I'm trained as a sniper observer, I ask him, do you want me to dress out as a rest team member, or do you want me to deploy as a high ground officer so that I could start relaying information and intelligence? He advises me that we have another officer that's already going to be doing that and deploying like that in the observer capacity to go ahead and dress out for the arrest team. So that's what I go to do.
Now, I forgot to ask, but why did you check in with Sergeant Fox before joining up with the other officers who were there at the scene?
Well, he's my immediate supervisor, and in the event that this goes to a SWAT activation, he needs to know where I'm going and what I'm doing. So he can have that. He usually has a checklist in his vehicle of the SWAT officers that are either responding or that are on the roster, if you will, and then also field officers and where they're positioned and what they're doing and what they have as far as less lethal, what tools they need or don't need. He has all that going, so checking in with him is key to every call for me.
After you spoke with Sergeant Fox, please describe what you did to obtain the equipment that you needed for this particular incident.
Thank you. So in our vehicles, we have giant SUVs, and we have to have our gear with us all the time because we may have to respond from anywhere in the city to whatever particular situation whenever it happens. So I go back to my vehicle and start dressing out in my equipment that I'm going to deploy with. Granted that where this is happening on the hill, I can't just take one certain thing and then go, hey, I'm going to come back here in about 10 minutes because I need something else. I have to take what I can and everything I'm going to need for a duration for this to potentially turn into a SWAT activation.
It's correct to say that you obtained night vision equipment as one of the pieces of equipment that you took.
Yes, sir.
Why did you choose to obtain night vision equipment?
Well, it was already starting to get dark. The sun had already, from where I was at, the sun had already set behind me, behind the houses that were to the west of me. And I foresaw this situation potentially going into the dark hours. So I wanted to be prepared to have that tool available because of it getting dark, and if I was in a certain position, I'm going to have to wait in that position until other responding SWAT officers or other officers come up to join me. So I needed to be able to have a way to see what I was going to be doing up there.
Now, while you were receiving your orders from Sergeant Fox, was there another SWAT officer who approached?
Initially, no. Right after I had checked in, I started dressing out, and then I believe my team leader, Ramon Ornelas, ended up showing up. He checked in, and then we were kind of getting dressed out about the same time.
So I apologize, so I did not ask that question correctly. So when did you see that Officer Ramon Ornelas had shown up to the call?
Right after I had checked in with Sergeant Fox, I had turned around and started walking back to my vehicle to get dressed out for the call, and he had just pulled up and went up to check in with Sergeant Fox.
What is Officer Ornelas' role on the SWAT team?
Like I said, he's our team leader. For lack of a better term, that's another billet. It's like the highest rank among the team themselves. He's the go-between for our SWAT supervisor and the rest of the team. So that way, when a situation is occurring, the SWAT supervisor or the SWAT sergeant only talks to him, not to each individual SWAT guy who's on the team right there. He can talk to him, and then he can disperse the information to the rest of us, or tell the supervisor what he needs.
What authority does a team leader have over you?
Well, he pretty much is running the show if it's a SWAT activation. So as far as the team goes, we are equal as teammates, but as far as there being plans made or decisions made, he would be the go-to guy for the SWAT for the supervisor.
Now, there came a point in time when you and Officer Ornelas moved towards the rock formation where Mr. Boyd was located. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Would you please explain what happened as you and Officer Ornelas moved towards the rock formation?
Well, initially, like I said, when I first got there, I was looking between the two houses. So there's the front gate that's towards the street, and then you walk along the side yard. I believe it was 812 Piedra Vista there. But you walk along that side yard, and then there's that gate that opens to the mesa, to the open space. We had already walked through that, and we're at the back gate, stepping off from that back gate into the open space, and then we were contacted by Sergeant Fox to hold up for a quick sec.
Now, when you and Officer Ornelas were moving towards the rock formation when you made contact once again with Sergeant Fox,
Yes, that's correct.
what did Sergeant Fox direct the two of you, or what did Sergeant Fox say to the two of you?
Well, at that time, he was in contact with Officer Weimerskirch who was with the arrest team, and he was asking him if he had all less lethal tools that he needed. And it was at that time that Officer Weimerskirch had said he needed another impact munitions or a beanbag. So Sergeant Fox basically stopped us and said, "Hey, can you guys take up a beanbag with you when you go up?"
How was it decided who would obtain the beanbag shotgun?
Well, that was a little bit of a back and forth between myself and Officer Ornelas. I'm always the guy who wants to go and, hey, I'll take care of that for you, or I'll you need that, I'll pick it up, or whatever help you need, I'm going to go and do it. So being the go-getter on that, I told my team leader, hey, you need to go do team leader stuff. I'll go get the beanbag, and I'll meet you there in a second. He said his vehicle was closer, so he decided, I'm going to go get the beanbag, and you go ahead and head up. So that's how it hashed out.
On whose orders were you directed to move up to the location where Mr. Boyd was located?
Sergeant Fox.
Why didn't you simply say, you know what, I don't want to go up. I don't want to go up and deal with what's happening in front of me. I don't have enough information. I don't have enough of what I need to go. Why didn't you say that?
Well, I was I mean, my job is to go up there and deal with these situations. And you have to deal with situations that you don't have all the perfect information all at the same time and all at the right time. You have to go on the information that you have. So with the information that I had, and my sergeant says, hey, we have a task we're going to go deal with. I need you to go up there. I went.
Why didn't you just wait for Officer Ornelas to join you and go up together with a beanbag shotgun?
I trusted that Sergeant Fox needed me up there, and there was expedited tone in the officers that were on the arrest team, asking for, like, telling us that, hey, they need us up there. So I figured it was better to go ahead and push on and get up there and give them the help they needed, as opposed to just standing by.
When you say you heard an expedited tone from the officers on the arrest team, what does that mean?
Well, I remember on the radio traffic, they were asking for the beanbag, and when they initially, and I say they because I can't be certain on who was asking over the radio at this time, but they had asked for the beanbag and they said, we need it like now. And so that tells me that they need the officers that are coming up there to get up there now because something's about to transpire.
Now, approximately how far away was Mr. Boyd's location from where you were at the time Sergeant Fox ordered you to join the arrest team that was dealing with Mr. Boyd?
About 100 yards.
What could you see about what was taking place from that vantage point?
Well, from there, I was a little bit closer. Again, at this time, I could only see Mr. Boyd's head. It was only above the rock outcropping that he was currently standing on. He was still yelling at the officers and having a back and forth dialogue at that point. But still, the same thing was transpiring that I had just seen earlier when I was right before I got dressed out.
Now, would you please describe your movement as you went to that location where the arrest team was located?
Well, first I'm at the back gate to 812 Piedra Vista, and I'm moving now, negotiating the terrain between that house and the base of the hill itself. If you walk it, you're crossing over a bunch of uneven terrain. There's bushes, cactus. I mean, we've hit that a bunch in hearing all the testimony that's come through here. It was pretty rough terrain, rocks and stuff everywhere. I negotiate all that in a straight path to this ginormous boulder at the base of the hill, where I saw two other officers. I believe one of them was a state police officer, and they were standing, it was below where Mr. Boyd was, and Mr. Boyd was like another 30 to 50 yards up the hill from that first boulder. So I stopped there because an interaction was kind of happening between the arrest team to the south and him.
At this time, Your Honor, I would like to play a portion of the APD radio tape, which is Officer Perez's Exhibit C2, along with the transcript, which is Exhibit D2. And I would play the radio tape 44 minutes and 11 seconds to 45 minutes and 54 seconds. And with regard to the transcript, it would be page 43, line 8, through page 45, line 2.
No objection, Your Honor.
The subject said he wants to get his bags a long time, but it's not compliant, won't disarm himself. So we do have a plan in place if he comes toward us. I'll go ahead and stay on the radio and he's making movement for this time. 23, will you call out his movement for me? Top word 10 if I can get additional bodies up here. Yeah, I've got two. Send them up to you. Is it going to be okay if I send them straight up to you, or do they need to go in a certain direction? Straight up to us. He's talking about grabbing his bags and coming down, which is not going to be compliant with any commands and taking into custody. Traffic for do you have enough left legal out there? That's step 4. We're just going to try to keep Mike and then have a plan taken into custody. You don't know how much we pulled there? So the subject is changed coldly guy wearing a gray sweatshirt. It's pretty thick clothing, looks like it could hamper any kind of taser. No 5-4. 5-4. Sorry, do we have an answer? Do we have enough left people out there? Negative. We could have a 10 packs. Let's do. Okay, I'll send the taser shotgun up to you. Sorry, I haven't seen the shotgun. We need a feedback. And we're gonna need it quick. 10-4. Might be moving to you.
Upon hearing that Mr. Boyd wanted to get his bags and walk down, but is not compliant, won't disarm himself, what concerns did that raise in your mind?
Well, again, he's not being compliant, not willing to give up the knives, and now that he's gathering belongings, we don't know, again, we don't know what's in those belongings, if there's other weapons or anything else that could hurt officers, so we do, it concerns me because we don't want him handling anything else.
Why couldn't you just simply let Mr. Boyd walk down the hill and take him into custody later?
That's, we have the situation in somewhat of a containment at that point. You do not want the suspect to dictate and start moving your containment, especially towards the citizens and towards the public. So at this point, he's away from the citizens and the public for a small period of time. We still have, like I said, the people on the surrounding trails that we're dealing with, but right now, we have him somewhat contained, so you don't want him to keep moving.
What challenges do you face as an officer when a subject or suspect such as Mr. Boyd goes mobile?
Oh, well, you're running into big crossfire potential, especially with the terrain the way it is up there. You can't guarantee that you're going to keep perfect coverage of him the entire time if you were to let him move. You want to keep, like I said, the containment, and then you don't want the crossfire to happen, because if you get to a point where Mr. Boyd decides to change directions or move in a certain direction, you're now going to have officers pointing guns or having less lethal directly at each other, and you're going to end up causing a huge, what we call blue-on-blue situation, where we're taking each other out of the fight and dealing with the subject. So you want to make sure that you keep that containment around Mr. Boyd.
Upon hearing that the officers had a plan to take Mr. Boyd into custody, what concerns, if any, did that statement raise in your mind?
I'm sorry, could you say that again, sir?
Upon hearing that the officers had a plan to take Mr. Boyd into custody, what concerns, if any, did you have with that statement being made over the radio?
It didn't concern me. It just told me that they had a method that they were going to, or a plan that they had to, or that they were ready to deal with or to deploy. My concerns was that I didn't know it.
What do you mean you didn't know it?
Well, the plan wasn't voiced or made aware to everyone. I can understand why, because of security reasons and things like that, and not clogging up the airwaves. But I'm going to be moving up to that location, and I don't know what the plan is as of yet.
But you know there's a plan, is that right?
That's correct. I know there's a plan, I just don't know what it is.
Now, as an officer approaching that situation, why did you continue to move forward if you didn't know the specifics of the plan?
Well, in my training and experience, on my hundreds of deployments, I usually am not, I have the information that I've read on the CAD system and on my computer as I've gotten there, do my quick check-in and get any additional information from my supervisor, but I normally don't know what plans are in place or anything like that until I reach the arrest team / entry team. Once I get up there, I get advised of, hey, we need someone to fill this position, or we're going to be doing this. If the subject comes out, we're going to do this. Those type of things get communicated once I'm there. So that's what I was going with. Once I get up there, I'm going to contact the arrest team and find out, where do you need my help?
Now, did you hear Sergeant Fox tell Officer Weimer-Skirch, I'll send them up to you? Do you remember hearing them say that? Now, if you know, who were the two that Sergeant Fox was referring to?
Myself and Officer Ornelas.
Now, how did you, is it fair to say that you proceeded straight up to the location of the arrest team?
Well, first I went to to where the rock was, and then I took a southern route and came back around behind the arrest team.
Now, again, I think I took you a little too far before covering some more about this radio call. Now, in that radio call that we just reviewed, did you hear Sergeant Fox ask Officer Weimerskirch if he had enough less lethal?
Yes, sir.
And what was Officer Weimerskirch's response to Sergeant Fox's question?
He stated he needed a beanbag.
Now, what concerns did it raise in your mind that there wasn't a beanbag available to the members of the arrest team?
There wasn't a concern because from where I was standing, I could see one of the officers standing there with a less lethal shotgun, the taser shotgun, clearly from the yellow markings on it. I could see that he had that. So we already had one less lethal tool up there along with the canine officer.
Now, it was Officer Ornelas who made the decision to go back to his vehicle for a beanbag shotgun.
That's correct.
And if you had had it your way, you would have been the officer who went back for the beanbag shotgun.
Yes, sir.
But that's not how it turned out.
No, sir.
Now, at about 7:28, the operator notes that the subject is not compliant with the officer's commands and wants to walk down the hill with the bags. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
Now, there was a radio call that echoed that information. Do you remember hearing it?
I believe so. Yes, sir.
At this time, Your Honor, I would like to play Exhibit C2, the APD radio dispatch tape, from 44 minutes 19 seconds to 44 minutes 28 seconds, along with Exhibit D2, the transcript of Exhibit C2, which is from page 43, line 11, to page 43, line 14.
No objection,
The subject said he wants to get his bags and walk down, but it's not compliant, won't disarm himself. I don't know, we do have a plan in place if it comes towards.
Now, and I'm showing you a portion of the transcript, Exhibit D2. Do you see where it says, subject says he wants to get his bags and walk down but is not compliant, won't disarm himself?
Yes, sir.
When you heard those words, what did that tell you about what you were walking into just a few yards from where you currently were?
Again, he was refusing to be cooperative. He has wants to get his bags. He's not wanting to follow the commands of officers, and won't give up his knives. So it's concerning.
Now, there's also that statement that's not highlighted. We do have a plan in place if he comes towards us.
Yes, sir.
Upon hearing those words spoken by Officer Weimerskirch, what did that tell you about the plan?
It doesn't tell me anything. It just tells me he has a plan.
And you're relying on your training and experience to help you assist in that plan, even though you don't know what that plan is.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, at this time I'd like to play another portion of the APD radio dispatch tape, Exhibit C2, and along with the transcript, which is Exhibit D2. And the portion of the radio tape played is 47 minutes 14 seconds to 47 minutes 39 seconds. And the transcript portion would be page 46, line 11 through page 46, line 20.
No objection, Your Honor.
5 more to 10, just advise. I'm not complying with any commands to be taken into custody. He wants to try to walk down the hill with all his guys. I'm 714 out there. Yeah, he's going to be with a beanbag. I'm going to have you guys come over the plant as soon as possible before nightfall and take him into custody for his safety and ours. That's simple.
I'd like to focus on what Sergeant Fox said, and that is that I'm going to send 14 up there. Who is 14?
That's Officer Ramon Ornelas.
And then he's going to be with a beanbag. Is that correct?
Yes,
And that was the plan that the three of you, Sergeant Fox and Officer Ornelas, had discussed, is that right?
yes,
And then there's another statement. I'm going to have you guys come up with a plan, if it's possible before nightfall, to take him into custody for his safety and ours. Do you see that?
yes, sir.
Now, you heard that over the radio, minutes before you arrived on scene where Mr. Boyd was located, correct?
Yes, sir.
What did that tell you about the nature of the call that Sergeant Fox is asking the arrest team to come up with a plan to take Mr. Boyd into custody before nightfall?
That nightfall is a factor. We don't need the possibility for a night coming down and us not being able to see. That gave multiple avenues for Mr. Boyd to potentially get through the containment that we did have, which was very spread out, and that he was wanting this to occur once we got up there, this plan to occur before it got completely dark up there.
Now, you were at a rock with a state police officer and another officer, is that correct?
That's correct.
Do you recall who that other officer was?
I can't remember.
Now, approximately how far was this rock where the state police officer and APD officer were located to the location where the arrest team was staged?
About 30 to 50 yards.
Would you please explain what occurred as you traveled to the final location where you were situated before the officer-involved shooting took place?
Well, like I said, I had stopped at that location. I was moving straight towards the arrest team, and then I saw an interaction between the arrest team to the south and Mr. Boyd. So when I saw that interaction, I moved over to where those officers were at that boulder and waited there because I thought potentially this was already going to be resolved and I wouldn't have to go up there. The demeanor changed from Mr. Boyd. He had gathered his bags, but then he threw them back down. So then I went from there and said, okay, well, he's not going to let himself be arrested right now by these officers. So I moved down through the terrain to the south, staying below them, and then arcing back around from the south, heading back north, coming up behind where the arrest team was. And while I'm walking up that area, I'm starting to look at the terrain and where the officers are at, where Mr. Boyd is at, and then what is the potential for us to have cover, if any, out there in this open terrain.
Now, you mentioned that there was a change in Mr. Boyd's demeanor. Do you remember saying that?
Yes, sir.
Now, would you please explain to the jury with more specificity what it is that you heard Mr. Boyd say and do that caused you to believe that his demeanor had changed, and then what happened to then have Mr. Boyd, again, I guess, elevate his demeanor?
Well, like I said, when they were first interacting with him, he seemed calm and was having some type of dialogue with the team to the south. I couldn't make out exactly what it was he was saying. When he was having that interaction, that's what led me to believe, oh, okay, we have some type of resolution occurring here. So as I waited for that, then all of a sudden his demeanor changed instantaneously, and he was shouting and screaming at the officers, and he threw down his bags at his feet and then started shouting at them some more. So that completely, escalated it back up to him making the what they refer to as the 1040 comments. And so at that point, that's when I started moving to change that location, or change my location and get up to the arrest team so that they could I could assist them with whatever it is they had going on.
As you were approaching your final position, what could you hear Mr. Boyd say, and how was he saying it?
Well, as I was approaching, on my equipment, I have these earmuffs that allow me to hear my radio traffic, but then there are also noise-canceling headphones for loud noises, devices, gunshots, things like that. It dampens that sound. So having those on, I could only hear partially what Mr. Boyd was actually talking about, and honestly I wasn't even focusing on what he was saying. As I was walking up, I was noticing where he was at and what he was doing, and then where the other officers were in relation to him, and then taking in the whole location where we were at.
Based on your observations that you've just described, what tactical advantage did Mr. Boyd have over you and the arrest team?
Oh, he had an elevated position, and it's definitely a tactical advantage. The rock outcropping was a big concern for me, because from where I was at, that's where, on the comments that I had read on the way up, was where his belongings were at, and he was around that rock outcropping. And then the path, the game path of where he was at towards the officers was a downward slope from where he was at, coming down towards the officers. So again, like you've heard several times, gravity plays a factor and enables him to gain that distance and cover that ground a lot faster. But also, just in any tactical situation, we want to have the high ground, not the other person. So the other person, in this case, Mr. Boyd, had the high ground on us.
Now, you had a camera with you that day
Yes, sir.
on your helmet.
Yes, sir.
Would you please describe that camera that was on your helmet?
Well, it's a GoPro contour helmet camera. It was mounted on the side rail of my helmet, which sits above my right ear and up about 20 degrees up and to the right on my helmet. It's a high-definition camera that was issued to me by the department to record encounters with the public and during my being on the SWAT team.
Why did you activate or turn on your GoPro camera?
It's in our policy to, anytime we're having an interaction with the public, or especially SWAT team members, having an interaction with the public and dealing with a critical situation, you turn on your camera and start recording.
Now, did there come another point in time as you were moving up to this location where you once again paused and waited?
Yes.
Okay. Would you please describe why you paused and waited before you reached that point where you were located at the time of the shooting?
So just like when I had stopped at the base of the hill where the rock was at, as I started walking up, I saw Mr. Boyd start to gather belongings and start moving around. He was also, again, talking with the officers to the south. So as I'm walking up to the, I'm lower than the arrest team, but just behind them. As I'm walking up, I don't want Mr. Boyd to pay attention to me. I want him to stay interacting with those officers, and I don't want to be hampering anything that they have going on with him if this is actually going to be a resolution again. So here I am thinking that, okay, we're getting a resolution again, and now that I notice I'm closer, that's when I kick on my camera and hang back from those officers so that way they can deal with whatever it is they're going to do, and I don't interject as of yet. But at that time, when I'm standing there, I'm looking at the terrain and everything that's going on with where the officers are at and where Mr. Boyd is at. So I'm noticing the rocks that are just ahead of me, the only thing that I have in the general area as cover, that I can use as cover to protect me. And then I can only see one of the officers closest to me, the one with the taser shotgun with the yellow markings, obviously. He's closest to me and by this bush, and then the other officers are above him, which I can't see them at all. So I'm just pausing there and waiting while they're having this interaction between Mr. Boyd and those officers.
Now, I wanted to clear up some things about the plan and your lack of knowledge of this plan. Again, Sergeant Fox asked Officer Weimer-Skirch to develop a plan, correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Even at this point, what do you know about the plan that Officer Weimer-Skirch was supposed to develop?
I know nothing of the plan.
Now, what efforts do you remember Officer Weimer-Skirch making over the radio to inform you or anyone else about the plan?
There was nothing communicated over the radio, just that he had a plan.
Do you actually know if Officer Weimer-Skirch had a plan?
I can't be certain, but he stated that he had a plan.
Now, what was your understanding as you were there watching this unfold, why the officers wanted to take Mr. Boyd into custody?
They wanted to take him into custody for the aggravated assault on peace officers.
Why couldn't you just come back another day to do that?
Well, if we leave, then there's that potential for a citizen to just come along and interact with Mr. Boyd, and then you have another incident that we're having to deal with, potentially that he is attacked or left that location and now goes into the community. We can't allow that to happen. It's our duty to arrest someone for that crime.
Now, you had talked about watching the arrest team. Now, in watching the arrest team, what did you observe, if anything, that indicated that the arrest team, either of the three members, knew you were even there?
Well, there was no indication that they knew I was there.
And why do you say that?
Well, like I had said before, my goal was to not interact with them as of yet when I first paused, and I was going to go up and talk to those officers and find out where they needed me, what job they needed me to fill. So as I'm hanging back there, no one had turned and looked at me or, to my knowledge, had heard me walking up where they were at. Or at least the officer that I had saw initially closest to us, which I later find out is Acting Sergeant Ingram, was focused straight ahead on where Mr. Boyd was at. Rightfully so. All of them were focused straight ahead on Mr. Boyd. So there was no indication that they knew I was moving up or even that I was there.
Now, you had mentioned that you wanted to find out how you were to be deployed. Did you say those words?
Yes, sir.
Now, what was your intent when you went up to that location about finding out what was taking place and your role in that particular plan?
Well, like I said, for dealing with SWAT activations, I'll usually check in with my team leader who is at the arrest team or entry team. In these situations where someone else other than the team leader is running the situation, I will check in with the officer that is basically in charge at that location and find out from them what they need as far as help. Do they want me to take up a tool? Do they want me to be hands-free? Do they want, what job, what roles do they need? I try and get that communicated from them as soon as I arrive.
Your Honor, I see that, about an hour and 50 minutes
Might be good.
might be a good time.
So let's take